This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod. I'm Tony Pesta, joined by Jackson Flickinger, and today we have a quick episode for you because the full 2024-25 NBA schedule has been revealed. Me and Jackson thought we would just go through all 82 games and tell you whether we think they're going to win or lose each individual game. I'm kidding. There weren't any surprises.
I wanted to do it.
Yeah, that was Jackson's pitch, but considering there weren't any surprises on the schedule, it's basically, we all knew what was going to be on there. Now we can just look forward to certain matchups, highlight certain portions of the season that look interesting, and really just yap away at a point in the offseason where there's not much to talk about. So, Jackson, why don't you kick it right off? What game or games are you most looking forward to?
Well, I would say I'm most looking forward to the second game of the season because the first game of the season is an automatic loss. Starting the season out in Toronto, that's a loss. If you know anything about the Cavs, post LeBron, if it's in Toronto, it's a loss. And something that has dated, throughout the LeBron tenure, his many tenures, is, at Indiana, that's also a loss. So those are like two rules that you have to live by. So at Toronto, that's a tough way to start. I mean, it shouldn't be a tough way to start. And it feels like they play the Raptors 97 times. Like, I feel like every month they play the Raptors.
Well, it's because it's always a rock fight. Someone gets hit in the face by someone. Darius, Garland. He might just want to take the opening night out. Just take it off because he's going to get hit in the face. At least Gary Trent Jr. won't be there because that we all remember how 2 years ago that whole thing started. So second game of the season, though, that's what you're most excited for. Why don't you tell people about that one?
Well, that'll be interesting to see how JB handles everything and just to see how the Cavs handle everything. I think we could get a couple passive-aggressive remarks from JB, I think is how I describe it. So those are always fun, and I think that if the Pistons did win that game, I think JB would be pretty fired up. So that could be interesting. Obviously, we're a Cavs podcast, so we don't want that. But, content-wise, that'd be interesting. So I am looking forward to that. And, the first home game of the season is always fun. That's always something that, it's like basketball's return. It just feels like everything's right in the world again.
Yeah, that will be the Cavs home opener, October 25th. JB Bickerstaff making his return. Listen, I like JB and I am rooting for him, but it's like you want your ex to be happy, but you don't want them to be happier than you. You know what I mean? Like, I hope JB does good, but I also hope that the Cavs run them out of the gym in that first game. I'm really interested to see the comments that JB makes, if he's going to be a bitter ex or how he's going to handle it. And I'm also interested to see what he does in the game because, like, is he going to try and prove a point? Like, is Isaac Okoro just not going to be defended by anybody? Are they just going to trap Darius Garland every possession and, like, JB's going to prove a point? And vice versa. Like, I think Mobley should just take a couple setback threes just out of spite, in my opinion. They should just get crazy with it. I'm very interested to see how that goes. The whole matchup. Normally, I wouldn't care about an October game against the Pistons, but JB obviously makes it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, JB doesn't have the tools that the Cavs do, so it feels like he's kind of fighting with a couple arms tied behind his back. But it should be interesting. I feel like the worst time to play bad teams is like really early in the season, just because there's all these like positive like momentum going. Like, we had a great training camp. We're really seeing progress. I saw this thing.
They haven't lost 25 in a row yet.
I saw this thing like ESPN, maybe it wasn't ESPN. Somebody projected like the 2028 team, Olympic team, and they had Cade Cunningham on it. And I said, guys, like, what are we doing? Like, Evan Mobley wasn't on it, and Donovan Mitchell was on it, but like Cade was. So I was like, that doesn't make sense to me.
I like Cade, but I wouldn't.
Well, you like everyone, so that doesn't. Mean
I like
anything.
a lot of NBA players, but
I won't say the ones that you don't like. But it's so like you're gonna be getting that time where it's like we're gonna be coming from a preseason training camp. Everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, Cade Cunningham's really good. Cade, he's just like he was for the select team before the FIBA games in 2023. Like he's just putting on a show. He's just he's ready to take the next step." So I think that those like it's easier to play the Pistons in like March and February when they've already like given up on the season. So I think it will be like a close game, but I genuinely am excited for it because there's going to be a lot of storylines, and it's like the outcome isn't like super weighty. Like I feel like they played the Knicks. What was it? They played the Knicks on like a Halloween weekend last season, and it was like they like to play them twice in a row. It's like, well, like if they don't win one of those games, like will Donovan Mitchell ask for a trade like before the end of the game? Like where like there was a lot of storylines, but it was a kind of like this really means something. Yeah. Whereas like this game, it's like if the Pistons win, everyone will be like, oh, good for JB, and everyone will move on. Like it's not like you're not like proving anything, but there will be some fun storylines. So I'm into that.
Yeah. Yeah, their first 3 games of the season are against Toronto, Detroit, and Washington. Now, I know at Toronto is a little bit of a weird one for Cavs, but realistically, you should be able to go 3-0 and start the season with a bang if you're just, playing at the level that we expect. Speaking of players and teams that I am not a big fan of.
The Alex Sarr disrespect is insane, but keep going.
Yeah, just writing him off right away.
Yeah.
Speaking of teams that I'm not a huge fan of, one game that I am honestly still probably most looking forward to, I need the therapeutic release that will come from just blowing out the New York Knicks. We didn't really get that last year. I know they won the one game against them, I think after Halloween, but everyone was injured. The Knicks didn't have their guys. We didn't have our guys. I know both teams, well, the Knicks have changed quite a bit. The Cavs are relatively the same, but I'm still hanging on to that playoff loss, and I need a therapeutic release of seeing the Cavs get, because when Josh,
I don't know what to tell you here.
When he yanked Donovan Mitchell's chain, that was like a low point of last season, and I need them to correct the score there and get them back, because it's been really embarrassing. So that's something that I'm waiting for. They play October 28th, and then they don't play them again until February. So that'll be interesting to see, because I know a lot of people, especially with the Bridges trade, a lot of people think maybe the New York Knicks have like taken that step into being on the same tier as Boston, and the Cavs are kind of falling behind. I think this is an early opportunity to maybe, make a statement, as much of a statement as you can make in October.
I want to clarify something. The New York Knicks suck. I want to get that out of the way. However, they have, I don't think it's a bad matchup for the Cavs. I think the Cavs should, on paper, be an okay matchup. We've talked about this a million times. But I have zero confidence in the Cavs ever looking like a decent team against the Knicks. So that's like, if you were going to point to the games that I'm least excited for, that's like one of them. Anytime they play the Knicks, I don't want to see that. That's not fun. Like that game last year, that was awful. That was like the lowest point of the last 2 years, probably, I think. Well, okay, besides the playoffs, obviously. But
yanking chain.
That was just so bad, because like they had like McBride played 47 and a half minutes, because it was like, oh, Brunson got hurt. Well, we can't change the rotation in any way, so McBride just go out there for 47 minutes, and he played great. It was just like they didn't have, like, the Knicks were really injured. They didn't have anybody, and they just
took it straight to us.
Like, the Cavs didn't have Mitchell, but the Cavs should have handled business. It was bad. It was a really bad, like, Darius Garland the last couple possessions was doing some just bad things. So like, I don't want to see that ever again in my life. Like, I'd be fine if the Knicks and Cavs never played again.
You might be onto something there, because this matchup is quickly kind of becoming like, I mean, we've already kind of hit on this concept, but like how the Cavs used to treat the Hawks and the Raptors, like just no matter what those teams did, we just had an edge over them. Except the Knicks don't have LeBron James, so it feels a whole lot worse when you're just getting bullied by this team.
By Tom Thibodeau and his four remaining pieces of hair.
Yeah. Anyways, so then there's the obvious games that we're looking forward to. Getting a chance to play Boston and Orlando again. Rematch of the playoffs are always fun. Orlando has changed quite a bit. Boston, same team. I mean, why would they change
But
anything? They just won the
I
title.
do want to point out, I think it's a really interesting stretch in the beginning. You
Mm.
have Friday, November 1st, against the Magic at home. Then the next day you go to Milwaukee, and then on that Monday, Milwaukee comes back home. So I think that's a really an interesting three games and 4 day stretch that will give you an idea of like where the Cavs currently are. You know, you're going to be having a new coach, a new offensive system, hopefully. So they're probably not going to be hitting on all cylinders right out of the gate. So that should give you a good test as to like where the Cavs currently are. And I do think the Bucks are a team that everyone's kind of sleeping on. I know that they're
Mm.
not a perfect team, but I think they're a better team than we saw last year. The Adrian Griffin thing was bad. He was not prepared for the job. I think Doc Rivers isn't like a great coach or anything, but I think they're going to come out looking like a lot better team. So I think that could be like those series of games could be really interesting to see where the Cavs stack up right away.
Yeah, I certainly hope that the Cavs start this season on a better note than they did last year because aside from injuries, it was ugly. Every game felt like this is if they lose this, JB is gone. Mitchell could demand a trade at any second. This year they enter with a little bit more clarity and just I think some peace overall of like, okay, Mitchell's extended. We got the core four locked in, which I know for some people that's not a good thing, but for the Cavs, at least they feel a little more comfortable. They have a new coach. Like they have to figure a lot of things out, but hopefully this is a little more seamless. One more game, and I want to talk more specifically about like specific stretches and stuff like that in a second. But one other game that every year is always for as long as LeBron James is in the league. When he comes back to Cleveland, it's going to be on your calendars. And this year it's on October 30th. And so I wanted to introduce breaking news from Fear the Sword, the betting lines for LeBron's Halloween costume this year. Now, we have the favorite at plus 250, the Crow, at plus 400, the Joker, plus 750. This one's a little bit of an oddball, but Frankenstein's Monster. It's a classic. He hasn't done it yet. He's a tall dude. He could do it. And then we have two more, plus 1200, Wolverine. And then plus 1500 is other. You just guess who you think it's going to be. Jackson, do you have a pick on who you think LeBron's going to dress up as? Because he goes hard every year.
I don't know. I feel like he's leaning into being corny. So whatever is the corniest possible thing, I think
We can
that's
help you there.
yeah. So I don't know. I think Wolverine would be pretty corny.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think maybe and they play in. I was looking at their schedule. I think they play the Raptors right after they play in Cleveland. Wolverine's Canadian, right? So
Oh, there you
maybe
go.
there's a
There's
connection
a
there.
connection. Well, I have one that I didn't think of. Someone commented this. They said Captain America, cash it now. Don't worry, I've already
Oh,
sent the black
that is
SUVs.
there. It
There's black
is.
SUVs on the way to that person's house because Vegas is going to lose a lot of money if this one gains traction. I don't know how it slipped my mind. You want to
Yeah,
speak of
that's it.
corny? That
That's corny.
normally you would think, okay, you don't want to go with the one that's too obvious or too corny, but it's LeBron James, so you can almost guarantee that he's going to be Captain America. He's going to have a custom Captain American shield. Maybe it'll have the Nike check mark in the middle instead of the star. I don't know, but that seems like a pretty heavy favorite. The odds makers really dropped the ball, letting that one slide.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, what was I thinking?
What was I thinking, honestly?
Yeah, what was anybody thinking? Oh, also this
My
is
other,
the
yeah,
lines
go
are
ahead.
not real. I think
Yeah,
that's we should point that out.
we should clarify that. Just because honestly, you never know
You
nowadays.
never know. You never know.
Before we move on, I will say my dark horse, my pick before I was aware of Captain America is Nosferatu. I could see LeBron being a vampire. He's a real horror fan. The one thing that makes me think maybe he won't go Wolverine or Deadpool or Captain America is that he does like to, and I'm saying this not as a compliment. I mean this as a compliment. He likes to dress up as a freak. He doesn't like to do like the, you know, he went as Beetlejuice, Pennywise. Like he likes to really get into it. I kind of
It's
feel like
true.
Captain America is a little too normal, but the whole Olympic team, look, Captain America, Avengers, it seems almost too obvious. So bringing this back to reality and the Cavs schedule, one thing that everyone always pays attention to are the national TV games. Now, last season they had 17 games on national TV. This year it's 16. So they have one less game. They added one to the TNT
Oh,
schedule,
I was about
but
to say,
they
and
lost two ESPN games.
it's only 8 because we don't count NBA
I was
TV.
that's
Like
what I was gonna
we don't
say.
need to do
The
that.
other 8 are NBA TV, which I guess is like technically national TV, but really, so they have 4 TNT games, 4 ESPN games, then the 8 NBA TV games, which technically national TV, but no one cares that much about. So, look, someone mentioned on Twitter, like if they're good enough, they'll end up getting flexed onto a couple more national TV games. But this is about what I would have expected, anyways. It's Cleveland. I don't personally think that just because we're a small market means you shouldn't get national TV games, but that's just kind of how it works. They're not the most popular team in the NBA. They're not a legit title contender. So 16, 8, if you count just the non-NBA TV games, that's not bad. But to get Jackson in here, is there any stretch from the schedule? I know you mentioned early on. Is there anything else that stands out to you as either good or bad?
I feel like sometimes you don't really look at the schedule until you like. Well, you don't like you look at the schedule, you don't like absorb the schedule until you're actually like in it. So
Yeah.
I feel like the schedule's pretty balanced for the most part. March
Agreed.
always seems to be tough just because you always have the MAC tournament road trip, so that's always something that like you're always going to have to worry about, and that you know this past season, I feel like they lost every single game on that road trip. I don't
Felt
think
like
they
it.
did, but like they're on the road for about a week going Clippers, Kings, Suns, Jazz, and Trailblazers. Like I don't know if any of those teams are like really great teams, but it's sometimes tough. Like even though you're gonna have Utah and Portland on the back end of that trip, it can be really tough to like grind out wins in those games when you've been on the road for that long. So
Yeah.
that's one of those stretches where when we're talking about seeding at the end of the year, it's almost like you gotta like handicap that. Like, well, that's at least gonna probably be 3 losses. So
Yeah, I also had that March, just the whole month of March on my notes here because they play 16 games in 31 days. Thankfully, now the fact that you're traveling and playing that many games kind of neutralizes any advantage that you'd have here, but the opponents that they play during that stretch aren't amazing. If you look at least entering the season, because it's hard to predict this stuff. Like if you remember last year, we saw OKC and Indiana early on, and we were like, oh, these should be easy wins. And then you get to the end of the season and you realize, well, OKC was not a pushover, and neither was Indiana. So who knows what these matchups will look like by the time you get to March. But if you're just counting from last season, 10 of the 16 games are going to be played against lottery teams from last season. Now Memphis is included in that. It's very
yeah,
possible
they're
they'll
not
have a
going to be a
bounce
lottery
back
team.
year.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, the Clippers, they lose Paul George. You never know. Like, who knows what's going to happen with Kawhi? That could be an easier game. But regardless, it could really be ugly,
I mean,
or it
they
could be
could
a
also
string of a bunch of wins.
they could also be up 20. They could also be up 25 in the third quarter and lose. You never know.
That was maybe actually the low point of the season, even worse.
And
Than,
there was lots of
there's a
low
couple low
points.
points, but that one hurt the most, especially because Mobley and Allen, the way they just, I think Mobley falls down first and Allen trips over him on the game winner from Paul George. That one hurt. And then they didn't even get a shot off. JB ran his special, the corner 3-pointer that everyone saw coming.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah,
that stretch in March, it could be ugly, or it would
or
be
it could be
nice to see
good.
them hit their stride there, similar to how they hit their stride in January, where they had a bunch of games against lottery teams and just kept winning. Trying to be optimistic. That could be cool. It would be nice to see them hit their stride at the end of the season rather than kind of fall apart at the end of the regular season as they have the last few years.
to kind of
That would be nice.
to kind of build upon that, one of the stretches that I think is going to be really important is the first week and a half after the All-Star break. That's an area where the Cavs have really struggled coming out of the gate for the last quarter of the season after the break. And you start off with on the road against Brooklyn, and then you come home, play the Knicks, then you have a home game against the Grizzlies, which I think the Grizzlies are going to be a good team. I think we've seen in the past the Cavs and Grizzlies have like a little bit of a rivalry. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe less so without Brooks being there, but still, I think that there is something to how these teams are kind of similarly built, where you have Jaren Jackson, you have a big imposing front court, you have a superstar in the back court, a younger team that kind of wants to win on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's defensive side of the floor, defensive side of the ball. That's a football term. Anyways, like I think that's going to be a big game, and then you go on the road to Orlando and then Boston. So that's a really tough stretch right there in an area where the Cavs really need to like come out strong and kind of prove to everybody that like, hey, we can start good, we can play good down the stretch of the regular season, and if they lose like 2 out of the first 3 or something like that, there's going to be questions like, oh, hey, Donovan, like, this is the 3rd year in a row this has happened. What do you do to stop it? And then once those questions get asked and stuff, it feels like it just becomes this, like, lingering cloud over the team. So I think it's really important for them to start off well after the All-Star break.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And to extend that, if you look at that April schedule, they played New York and Indiana twice each. So if we're just thinking of playoff standings, last year it was the final game of the regular season that determined where New York, Indiana, Cleveland, and I believe Milwaukee all fell. And so if you play them, I think you play Indiana the final game of the season, right?
You go Pacers, Knicks, Pacers to close.
Yeah. So that's just the standings are going to be wild. We'll see if the Cavs throw a game again. I hope not, because that was a mess. That was another low point. And in a season that was
so many
relatively
low
successful,
points.
there were some extreme.
Was it
lows.
successful? There was only a month and a half of success. There was a month and a half of success,
there were
and then
the
second half of Game 7, I think, was a success. But other than that, I don't know, man.
So the last note that I have here, because how much content can you really squeeze out of the schedule being released? Something that was pointed out by the Isaac Okoro fan club. Shout out to them. Hope they're doing
Which
well
is also
at
you.
This time. Yeah, it's my burner account.
This is all you're doing. You tweeted from Fear the Sword, and then you brought it up like Fear the Sword tweeted it, and now you're doing the same thing. You're not.
Well, okay. Listen, give credit to where it's due. Whoever's running that account does a great job, and it is not me. Genuinely not me. But they pointed out that the Cavs only have 2 games at home on a Friday or Saturday throughout the entirety of 2025. No love for downtown Cleveland on the weekends. If you want to catch a Friday or Saturday night game, you got 2 chances. First, the Browns moved to Brook Park, and now this happens. Downtown Cleveland might never recover.
That is crazy.
It is crazy. They have some Sunday games, but like Sundays, like, it's not the weekend,
Sundays, and those are like these like weird day games, which are good to cover because it's you get out of there early, but nobody cares about that. They have so many Sunday games. They said you're missing the Browns. Why don't you come out to a Cavs game? But that is really weird.
And it's bad because this is just my memory, so you don't fact check this, but I feel like the Cavs really suck at the day games. It feels like they always come out flat. Maybe that's just my memory, but I don't.
They're really like varied. They're really varied in like the time because it's like in January it's 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Then we go 3:30, 7:30, 3:30, 6, 3:30, 6, 1. So not really. Well, the last 1 o'clock game, it's almost 1 o'clock. But yeah, maybe the Cavs just suck, Tony. Maybe that's it. Well, like because it's like the Clippers debacle. That was a Sunday day game, so that was bad. Were they through the game against the Hornets? Sunday day
1 o'clock game. Yeah.
So there could be something there.
It's not great. The other thing that I hope is I don't know what Tim Bontemps, what his schedule is, where he's going to be, but I hope Evan Mobley has it marked on his calendar because he always sucks when Tim Bontemps is in the arena. The Celtics series was like the first time where he showed out, and I was like, thank God. Because like, I not to send shots, but I would imagine the only times Tim Bontemps watches the Cavs is when he's at one of the games that he has to cover.
Those
So
are
if that's the
shots, by the way.
only, okay, kind of. I don't mean to be too disrespectful. It's hard covering every team
That's
in the
pretty.
NBA.
It's pretty
It's tough.
disrespectful.
It's tough to cover every team in the NBA. My point is, if the only games of Evan Mobley that you're watching are the games that Tim Bontemps has been attending, I could understand why you'd be like, wow, this guy sucks. If you watch all the games, he's actually pretty good. So hopefully Evan Mobley can give Tim Bontemps a better impression moving forward, because it has been bad. It's been very bad.
I'm glad that that's on the top of your mind. Like, yeah, we gotta,
We
who
gotta
cares about
prove
wins and
our
losses?
worth to Tim
Who cares about
Bontemps.
any of that? Tim Bontemps,
Well,
you have
we
to.
gotta get the Hoop Collective on our side. That's all. That's all.
I mean, you already have. It's a joke because they're joking about Wendy being too much of a homer. So there's like we're just taking it
There
way
has
too
to be a
seriously.
balance.
Right?
Yeah.
Just we gotta stop.
That's what Cavs Twitter is for. Anyways, any last takes on the schedule? Or I think we hit everything.
So I counted 71 wins. So if you take away those games against the Raptors and Pacers and the Knicks, I think that leaves you about 71.
Yeah.
So
I didn't do my count, but that sounds right. That sounds right about where I probably would have ended up.
I have the Celtics at 4.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so slam the under on them. Yeah. Yeah. It's fun because you're reminded that like basketball it's coming back up, and it's crazy that like once the season starts, it feels like it just goes where it's like, oh, it's the beginning of the season. Oh, now it's the All-Star break. Oh, the playoffs are around the corner, and it's just fun to be thinking about that again, even though we're still about a month and a half away from media day and training camp starting, but it's coming up fast, guys.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I think, 71 wins is a little generous until they sign Okoro. I'm feeling, 67 for now. If they can figure out the Okoro situation.
Wait, are they winning more games with Okoro or less?
That
more games. All right. Okay. I don't think it goes without saying.
Well, for some it does. For the Okoro fan club,
Would you rather have Niang or Isaac Okoro?
With what?
This is sorry. This was an inside joke. I don't.
What would I rather?
This was an inside joke. Anyway, sorry.
Anyways,
we didn't really talk about the in-season tournament much, so I don't know if we want to get like too deep in the weeds with it. But I do think one of the things that's interesting about who the Cavs are playing. So in their group, they have the Hawks, Celtics, Bulls. That's it.
Wizards.
So, Wizards. So I think it's interesting because there's one wild card team from kind of those groups, and every other one of those groups seem to have like 2 or 3 good teams, whereas this one only has like the Celtics should be the best team in the group. But the other 3 teams kind of stink. So I think that, and they play the worst team in the group, the Wizards, the last. So I think it really sets up well for the Cavs to just run up a ton of points, like to go 3-1 and run up a ton of points. So I think that's something that's interesting because I really think it's important for the Cavs to kind of make it past the group stage of the in-season tournament and the NBA Cup, because this group still needs they still need playoff experience, and I know the in-season tournament isn't the playoffs, and I'm not going to pretend that it is, but it's a closer approximation to the playoffs than what you're getting through the regular season. So I think it would be great if they were able to get to like the knockout round. So
yeah,
if they did do that, no matter how they played in the knockout round and stuff, I think that would be a success in the sense that we're getting more data on them. We're getting to see them in an environment where they're really trying to like really game plan, and teams are really game planning against them. So I think that'd be great, especially under Kenny Atkinson. So I just wanted to point that out real quick.
No, I agree with that entirely. And I do think the NBA Cup winning it is meaningless, right? Like it really doesn't mean anything, but I do think there's some confidence that comes for a team like the Cavs that's only won one playoff series, right? And even just winning that gave them a bunch of confidence and made you feel a whole lot better. You win a couple games in the tournament or even win the whole cup, that probably feels really good for a team that's still trying to establish themselves. At the very least, the NBA Cup and these group stage games, like you said, even games against Washington, Atlanta, it would be very easy for them to enter those games kind of lazy and not caring because it's the early regular season. Who cares? But now you have a little incentive to like, well, let's just beat the brakes off of this team so that even if we lose to the Celtics, we still have a chance of getting to the tournament. Who's to say how much the players actually care about getting to the tournament? I hope last season was an example where I think the players care at least a little bit. The intensity was definitely higher than a normal regular season game.
Yeah, and I think one of the best games of the season was that win on the road against the Sixers that kind of gave them an opportunity to advance, where it was like the Craig Porter Jr. game. I think it was like the game where he really felt him coming out. He had that like late layup in the fourth quarter that over Embiid that really like got people fired up. Darius Garland had a great game. Weirdly, like Tristan Thompson kept getting subbed in as like a defensive stopper.
Yeah.
So it was just one of those like really memorable games, and I think it was like a really good test. So you'd like to see this group face more of those.
Yeah, definitely. I agree 100%. That's all for today's episode of the Junkyard Pod. Please feel free to let us know which games you are most looking forward to, and let me know what bet you're placing on the LeBron Halloween costume prop. If you enjoy the Junkyard Pod and you want to help us out, all you have to do is hit subscribe and drop a like. Those two things go a long way towards supporting the channel, and we really appreciate it. And with all that being said, go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs. Brian, what's your Halloween costume for this year?